Sweet. All right. So I've titled this presentation, #Schumann Resonance, the Hidden Health Factor, Solar and Planetary Vibrations. So this is presented by myself, Alexis Buck of Ascension Diaries. Most of you guys already know who I am, so it's no problem. And I just created this whole presentation in order to try and bring us into a larger conversation about the Schumann resonance and about all the other factors that I've noticed that are really involved, and getting some like actual scientific theories and understandings about certain aspects. So the understanding of the Schumann resonance becomes a little bit more concrete in our minds, and it's easier to teach it to other people, basically. So let's begin. Okay, so the goal here is, again, to look and understand the connection between these three vibrating bodies. It is a major part of what I like to study. So obviously we have the sun, our human body, and then the planet. I have this quote to kind of give us some context about the study, and I actually can't read it because you guys are blocking me. There we go. There we go. Okay, so this is an Albert Einstein quote. It says, "We are slowed down sound and light waves, a walking bundle of frequencies tuned into the cosmos. We are souls dressed up in sacred biochemical garments, and our bodies are the instruments through which our souls play their music." Pretty woke quote for Albert Einstein. I hadn't heard this before, so it was really awesome to come upon this. And it's awesome to see that even back then that this body of knowledge and information was already coming to the collective consciousness, and it's still something that people are really just now becoming aware of in this lifetime. So it's very fascinating. So I just like to introduce you to myself and kind of give you some context of where I'm coming from on this. I don't consider myself a specific scientist of the Schumann resonances. I have a background in psychology, and I've been doing this almost as my master's or like my doctorate degree post-education, because I didn't believe in what the education system was actually doing. And I couldn't support giving them any more money after they had, put so many children in debt right before they were even 18 years old, putting them in student loan debt. So I was just very upset. And when I found out about the Schumann resonances, I was again upset and motivated, because it's such a major factor, in my opinion, to our psychology. And I thought that that would have been very important in my very expensive degree, but it apparently wasn't. But in my opinion, it is. And that's why now I'm taking the liberty to teach what I can about this. And in the process of teaching, I've also been able to learn, of course, and I am continually a student. I may flub up a couple times in this presentation, even with some basic things, just because a practice. And I just want you to not take every single word that I say as fact, but just take it in as your own information. And again, write down if I've said anything that is wrong or maybe could use a better explanation, so I can improve my presentation, because my goal is not to lead people astray. It's not to tell you the truth or the facts about this, because I honestly am so, disillusioned from the scientific factual world that I don't want to be a part of it. I really want to be more of a observer and just show you how I see things, basically. So I have all these platforms. You guys maybe found me from one of these: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We've got about 26,000 subscribers across all these things now. So this topic and this term and this interest has really, really expanded since I began it back in 2017, I believe. And 2018 was one of the hugest years of Schumann resonances that I've seen since then. So it was good timing, but I'll even show you one of those readings in a bit. So just a little preamble about myself. I'm not trying to preach to you. I'm just trying to share some information. So let's go. So again, and my goal here is also to empower you to basically take on some more responsibility and pursue your own expansion with more knowledge behind it, so you can make more of your own guesses and go out there in the world and have some more of your own hypotheses about how things are going to go. And there's just constantly events happening. So the more and more you participate with this, I feel like it's more empowering, because things aren't happening to you, as more so you're sensing them before they come, and also being able to look at the charts and astrology and so on to see what's actually coming. So here's a list of the theories that I'm going to work through in this presentation. I'll just read them to you here. So the first theory is that solar/earth magnetic and electric interaction is a downplayed or omitted environmental factor causing symptoms in the masses. 2, we can use the information released about the geomagnetic, Schumann, solar astrology, and lunar movements to navigate and thrive in our energetic environment. 3, there's a natural order of energy movement between our bodies and the sun, earth, moon, and cosmos. 4, there has been manipulations to this natural order for multiple reasons, including the information being released. 5, being informed of this is helpful to our psyches and our right as Earth residents here in this time and age. And finally, DNA evolution is occurring with the direct influence of cosmic weather. So I'm going to go through all of these things in this presentation. Hopefully that appeals to you, and we're going to have fun together. I'm just going to do one thing before we jump into the next slide, because I want to make sure you guys are all chilling. Okay, just making sure. I can keep going. Okay. I can't see you guys right now. I've made my little window super small. Okay. Next. So the first thing I want to cover is something that I was taught basically day one in my psychology courses in university. And it's talking about what is an environmental factor. So you can see here on the image on the right, there's a Venn diagram. One side says genes, one side says environment. In the middle, it says you. Also, it says phenotype. For those of you who don't know, phenotype are physical sort of cues on a being of their genetic coding, basically. So an easy example is eye color. An easy example is skin color, hair color. Those sort of things are phenotypes. And they also give clues to other parts of your DNA. So the theory here is that you're asking maybe why should you even pay attention to these environmental factors? And I will show you here. It says one of the promises of the Human Genome Project, which is one of the biggest scientific endeavors of the last 30 years, at least publicly. And I think it's 30 years old. Maybe it's even older now, maybe 50. I know they didn't really have computers when they were doing it. Okay, so the Human Genome Project was that it could revolutionize our understanding of the underlying causes of diseases and aid in the development of prevention and cures for most diseases. So they were going to literally try and decode and write out an entire piece of DNA and try and find where there's areas of issue. And it says, unfortunately, genetics have been found to account for only about 10% of diseases, and the remaining causes seem to have a different origin. Among these, the environment seems to play a key role. Therefore, to understand the causes and eventually the prevention of disease, the effect of the environment on health needs to be investigated, which thankfully I did learn in school. So this is good. So some examples here on the picture, of course, is there's some smokestacks. There is a city where I used to grow up where they had these smokestacks, and the city next to it, where downwind, had one of the highest levels of asthma in the capital, in the whole country, because of this environmental factor. People still lived there, bizarrely, but it was kind of a commonly known issue. Again, we have cigarette smoke. Again, that's another thing that can cause your DNA to mutate in an unhealthy way. And then we have working out and so on. Those are positive environmental factors that will make your DNA more healthy and be able to replicate itself with the least amount of issues, causing less disease. The next topic I want to tell you about is entrainment, which is a really simple topic, but it's massive because I feel like, again, a lot of people don't know this. So here we have two tuning forks. If you're unfamiliar, these tuning forks, the two prongs at the top, people tend to hit them against something like a hockey puck, and then they will resonate, they will ring, and you put the base of the tuning fork, you can put the base of the tuning fork directly on your body, and depending on what the tuning fork is tuned to, it can be really helpful as a therapy to actually kind of make that place that the tuning fork is touching become healthier and become more in resonance. And so if you actually hit one tuning fork and put a tuning fork next to it that has not been hit, the tuning fork next to it will begin to vibrate in the same frequency and begin to be taken over by the vibrations and the energy that you've put into the one tuning fork. There's also a process where they can shine and strobe lights into your eyes at a certain frequency. And that again will make your brain waves begin to mimic that frequency. So there are basically, when something bigger than you is vibrating, you have a better chance as something that's vibrating with less energy to kind of be influenced by that, or even maybe taken over by that vibration. And that's just kind of the way that our whole universe in a way kind of buzzes itself around, at least according to this information and these theories in science. So I'm asking you now, what are some of the biggest vibrating bodies in our environment? So again, we have the sun, definitely huge. One of the biggest energetic imports in our environment. And then of course the earth that we're on, and the moon in the sky, and then our own bodies and our own collective consciousness as well. So these are some major vibrating bodies that we're constantly interacting with, where it's very hard to escape the influence of these bodies. They're huge. So the behavior of these vibrating bodies is very, very important, in my opinion, to the overall health of the antenna, or the people, or the animals, or the life that's nearby these giant vibrating bodies. So that's when I began to study cosmic weather. And I'm going to go into cosmic weather. I'm going to go into the Earth's own system of vibrations and so on. And then we're going to get into the Schumann resonances. So I'm just going to build your knowledge here. So first of all, what's cosmic weather? It's basically just frequency coming from space. And the cosmic radiation is some of the very highest vibrating, which can penetrate the most. And then there's slower moving frequencies as well. But they all play a part. So I'm going to teach you a couple things about the sun first, because I've noticed with the Schumann resonance especially, there's a major, major connection between solar weather and what's going on with our own planet. So I'm going to teach you some of the things that are definitely going to be coming up more, because we're moving into a solar cycle. We're moving into a new solar cycle. It's been announced, I think it was officially began now in December of 2019. So this whole year we've begun solar cycle number 25. A solar cycle lasts 11 years. And so the peak of that cycle is in the middle of that 11 years in a way. And so right now we're on year 1, but again, moving into year 5 or 6, we're expecting to see a lot more of these events and phenomena going on, at least according to the science. We'll see. But I'm going to show you a few of these things. So I'm going to move your eyes to the bottom 2 pictures. The top left is kind of just an expression of where this intergalactic cosmic radiation can come from, and it's coming from the whole galaxy. It's coming from the universe. It's coming from basically just more stars, more planets, more shaking and moving and expressing and breaking down and exploding and stuff of our universe. And then we have our own sun, which a lot of it is absorbed into our heliosphere, and then our sun is actually affected, and it will release energy after that. So the first one here I see on the bottom left, this one is called a coronal hole. This is where solar wind comes out of. You can see it's a dark spot. It's basically a weak point where larger particles, or moving particles, can actually just kind of fly out. And when solar wind days are high, most people do notice, and it does get reported often, and it can cause our own planetary sphere to be disturbed quite a bit. Then I show you on the right, there is 3 others that I'd like to talk about. And the first one is solar flare. This is a really hot button topic. It's an enormous explosion on the surface of the sun, and it occurs when there's a buildup of magnetic energy in the sun's atmosphere, and it's being released. They occur usually near sunspots, which are very highly magnetic areas. And we have a certain class system as well for solar flares. We had an M class solar flare. They go, I don't know all the letters off the top of my head, but M is like a medium, if you think about it. And then the highest is called X class. And we were supposedly received like an X class flare back in the 60s, and it just melted all the telephone poles in North America, because I guess that was what was facing the sun when that hit. And so therefore there's a lot of infrastructure and stuff on Earth now, and a lot of investment in what the sun is doing, because all this technology and so on could get fried if we aren't properly prepared. And so during these solar flares, I've noticed I have the most changes in the earth and the geopolitical realm and people's personal lives and so on, is when these solar flares do come. And we are expecting more now as we are going into this solar cycle, the next like 5 years, and then again they'll dissipate for the other 5-6 years, but still it's going to be an active time. And the last solar flare we had, the M class, which was at the end of March, I believe, I heard multiple people close to me have a family member pass away. And that is another thing that I have noticed, is that when these flares do come in, it seems to be a time when souls and people tend to pass. And it gets into the spiritual side of things, but we're not going to go there yet. I just wanted to give you that little tidbit of information. The next thing I want to talk about is CMEs. These are the most popular thing I see on the sun. There's just this huge bubble of gas that are erupting from the sun for over several hours. It's a much slower process. The solar flares are like boom, like they're really, really fast. You'll see them on the charts. They explode and it's over and it's done, and we're in the wake of it, and it's wherever direction it's going, it's going there real quick. And mass ejections and coronal CMEs, they take about 3 days, that energy to balloon out and kind of hit our planet, 2 to 3 days, they say. So it does travel a little slower, but those also affect us. They charge our system. And finally, we have sunspots, which are, again, really highly magnetic places on the sun. Usually you'll get two. Whenever you get two next to each other, one is positively polarized, one's negatively polarized, and that's where the solar flares will pop off because of the tension between those two areas. Okay, so here are some examples of them. Left, you can see there's a massive coronal hole and those dark spots, so that's solar wind coming in. And then on your right, you see a CME popping out of the sun on the bottom here. And I see those all the time. I report them all the time because, again, they do seem to be correlated with the Schumann resonance. Again, I want to also mention that there's other stars as well in our system that are influencing us and sending energy our way, just through the geometry of this spinning everything. There's a sun called, or I guess a star called Sirius, Sirius A, Sirius B, Sirius C, and Sirius has a major history on our Earth. And during the Lion's Gate on August 8th, it is said that Sirius is in closest alignment with us and is like kind of directly shooting energy towards us. And the pyramids are aligned with that time. And during that time, people have a lot of revelations and additional, even ET contact and so on like that. So it's also very fascinating to watch where these other stars, our neighboring stars, are doing. And the reason for this is because they've been doing it for a very, very long time. Obviously, we've been charting the stars. You've seen it, you've heard it. The Mayans are doing it. The Egyptians are doing it. The Chinese are doing it. The Atlanteans are doing it. Like, people all through time have been doing this. And there's a very famous quote that I think many of my peers have actually used in their own presentations, but I was like, I've heard it enough times. It is really relevant. It's that millionaires don't use astrology, but billionaires do. And this is by J.P. Morgan, very successful, successful person. And so, the Billionaires Club isn't always the club we want to be in. Millionaires Club, maybe, yeah, that sounds more fun. But these are the people who are trying to make decisions and control based off of the stars and orient their power and leverage the power of the astrology over their dominion here. And so the more of us that are aware of it, the less we can be leveraged. And there's also another thing I wanted to briefly touch on the bottom left here, is that there's also something called medical astrology. So not only is your astrology super important, and in my Ascension class, which I'm going to be doing 10 classes in, it's like a 10 module class. One of the classes is going to be an astrology class where we are just going to go through and do our own astrology charts, and even multiple types of astrology, and just kind of get that information for ourselves, because it is so important, in my opinion, in connecting with your peers and in also learning your own patterns and applying them to life, basically. And in a way, medical astrology is very fun because there's astrological signs that can possibly control certain aspects of your physical suit, your physical body. And so when certain planets are in certain areas, like right now we are in Libra season, you can see here Libra season is right above, right below the navel, right above the genitals. It's like one of the biggest, one of the most powerful areas. They call the cauldron, and at least in like Taoist feminine literature, where this area is a major pool of energy. So this is also creative energy. So you may have noticed some people have mentioned that there's a lot of other people releasing classes, releasing new things right now, you know, being more creative. A lot of birthdays as well, a lot of people being born during this time of year. And so this is an example of how these kind of things mirror each other. The dogs are excited. Okay, so we're going to do a little review here, and then I'm going to continue moving on. So the review is, we're a walking bundle of frequencies. This is the popular theory. Environmental factors heavily affect your every choice. Entrainment is when stronger vibrating bodies influence weaker ones. Coronal holes and CMEs send charged electrons and protons in solar wind. And we receive charged particles from other sources in space. So I think right now I'm going to just pause, and I'm going to just check in with you guys. See if anybody has any like burning questions before we continue going on. If this is all making sense, then we can continue. Getting thumbs up. Okay, cool. Sweet. I'm just gonna check one more. Oh yes, there will be. I'm going to put this video up on my Patreon, and also maybe make it as, I'm not really sure exactly. I would like some advice actually on how I could properly put this out there to have the most organized situation for people. All right, so let's move on. So let's move on to the Earth, our beloved Earth that we are very much involved with. And I can't read the beginning up here. Okay, so we're going to talk about Earth's protection. So the sun and all these stars and the cosmos and everything are throwing all this energy and particles and wavelengths of light at us all the time, in a beautiful dance and orchestra of the cosmos. But our own planet has its own protection field. It has two types of fields that protect us from all of this stuff and kind of filter it so life can continue living on the surface for now. And so one of those is our geomagnetic field, which is caused by the liquid metal in our core. At least according to scientific theory. There are some people who think it's actually just plasma in our core. Some people are saying it's the liquid metal on the outer core that's causing this. Both make sense to me. So this rotation and movement of this metal and this plasma in our core is actually causing this toroidal field around the planet. This magnetic field, and extends around the planet quite a distance. And it's extremely important for sustaining Earth. We'd be totally radiated without it. And on the bottom right is an example of actually how flexible our magnetic field is, because when energy comes in, most likely from the sun, the magnetic field actually compresses in on itself, but it doesn't crush us. It just compresses in on itself and just basically weathers the storm, and the magnetic lines will catch and move behind it. And there's this whole beautiful physics process of these magnetic lines in this field protecting us from oncoming stuff. Oh, I'm gonna see if I can move this little thing from somewhere else. It's in my way. I can't even see with that thing there. Okay, so here we go. I also wanted to show you then that not only does our planet have this magnetic field, but basically every atom has one of these fields, and it's the Hermetic law, as above, so below. So basically, to the very smallest particle, to the very biggest planet, star, solar system, whatever, they all somehow manage to do this toroidal field. And so when our toroidal field is out and about and we're just chilling, and then the planet's toroidal field gets pushed upon by all of this energy, our toroidal fields will end up being also influenced by that, but not as a greater degree, because again, we are not the planet. We're on the planet. We're like a smaller fractal of the planet. And so we're being protected. Not only is it possible that the human body creates electromagnetic fields, but is the only way you can possibly exist as a coherent entity, which was taken from a Forbes article. And also, McCready explains that the heart generates the largest electromagnetic field in the body. So just like the core of the planet, our heart is our core. And it creates the largest field. All of our cells and atoms are creating their own field, but our heart, again, makes the biggest one. That's the largest, in a way, body of field creation. Therefore, we kind of entrain to what the heart is doing for the most part. But the brain and the gut also have quite a decently strong magnetic field. And there has been attempts to basically move our attention and corrupt our field, corrupt our ability to create a healthy field. It's very interesting. But yes, it's about 60 times, our heart thankfully is about 60 times greater in strength than our brain. And the goal is and has been that our electromagnetic fields from our brain and from our heart and from our gut need to become in a greater coherence, that they work together instead of fight each other. And you may notice that your mind, or you think you need to be doing something, but your heart is just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And it's really, really hard, but we are capable of overriding, funny enough, our heart sometimes. But I think that is another cause of disease, and it throws off your balance. So yes, HeartMath has said that they can actually detect your own field several feet away from a person's body. And when you're in someone's proximity, your fields are mixing with each other. So it's a very intimate process. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some of the things that affect, and will show you some charts that I use popularly on my blog and other people use on their YouTube channels, because this has become quite a topic. Like, measuring solar weather and space weather has become quite a trend, which is fantastic. And it shows you that there's a reason why we're becoming more conscious of this realm outside of us. And as another, in my opinion, another piece of evidence that shows that the consciousness of us and our planet and each other is actually rising and expanding. Because for the most part, I don't know anybody who was talking about this until I really became an adult. And now it's just like everybody's talking about it in my world. So it's amazing. So I'm going to show you quickly how to read these, and so you can do your own interpretation. So when you're like, oh, I'm feeling weird, you may go to the website, a couple different websites who have these charts up. And so the top left here is, again, the magnetosphere. You'll see that the information from the sun is coming in on the right, and you're seeing all the pooling and the effects on the magnetic field on the left. And this one will just continue. It's constant. It's constantly changing. The one on the right is the top right is the planetary K index. And so the K index actually kind of measures the disturbance of our magnetic field. So when it's in the green or it's really, really low, that means there's a really small amount of cosmic energy or outside energy coming in and stimulating and compressing our magnetic field. When it gets into the yellow and when it gets into the red, people really start noticing. They really start feeling odd and strange. And it really is because our earth is being compressed. That, not our earth, but in a way it is, but our field around the earth, which is part of the earth, is being compressed upon us. So they actually say that when the KP index is at 0, we're actually receiving more cosmic radiation because that compression is not as intense. There's more of a porousness there in a way, and it can come in. And then when it's super stimulated, like in the red or the yellow, people have a harder time having a harder time kind of having more of a cosmic conscious connection. Like, it's more into the body, it's more into the human, it's more into just more in your immediate realm. So in a way, in my opinion, our own fields are getting compressed during that time. And so we're more centralized and focusing in closer on ourselves, which is good for development. And in my opinion, there is a rhythm to this that could possibly be very, very divine. And we get the times of cosmic and we get the time of human intense compression for a reason. Then we have the bottom left is the X-ray fluxes. So X-rays are in a way a harmful wavelength of light to a certain degree. Like when you get too much, there's a reason you go get X-rays and they cover you in lead except everywhere that you want. And a lot of people don't even get X-rays if they're aware of the effects, because they know that it's not worth it. It could cause mutations in your DNA. It could break apart your DNA. And so when the X-rays are coming in and there's fluctuations and there's changes, watch these charts, because you will potentially feel discomfort in your body, in your cells, in your DNA, literally. And then on the bottom right this is the solar wind. And for the most part, I look at the purple line, which is the solar wind speed. Solar wind speed average is 400 kilometers per second. But sometimes it goes below that. Sometimes it goes 200 kilometers over that, 300 kilometers over that sometimes I've seen. I haven't seen it go past 700, I don't think, but I might be wrong. But again, we're moving into a more active solar cycle, so we might see that more so. When I started researching this, I was coming off of the end of the last solar cycle, so I didn't even get to see as much as I bet there was. But each of those colors, lines, they do give you information. There's other people who teach this more intensely. The phi angle in blue is another one, when the magnetics are actually shifting on the surface of the sun. When those flop, sometimes it causes releases of solar wind and so on. Okay, so another factor that you may want to watch for your own environmental factor is the aurora, because aurora is also a clue in a way that we're getting way more particles entering our magnetic field, and they're pulling those particles and they're gathering at the poles. And that actually causes so much stimulation that there's light being given off in the atmosphere. It's a beautiful phenomena, and it's a very big indicator that, again, we're getting a lot of solar wind, and this extra solar energy can cause effects in your system, in your own aurora. If you think about your body in your own field, you would probably get some stuff going on around your crown or your top of your head, maybe some migraines or so on, or just some tingling. And then again, possibly down by your gut and by your root or by your feet. Maybe you feel ungrounded. Maybe you're feeling super activated. Those are some possibilities. So keep a look on that. Follow your own body, figure out your own cues. That's another big thing I want to try and enforce, is that everybody I've noticed reacts slightly different to each event. A lot of people react a lot the same. Some people do the opposite. So I'm still learning what some of those factors are that cause things to change, but I have an idea that has to do with the meridians, which again also can do with your astrology. So that's more to come. So now I'm going to get into the Earth's ionosphere. So the Earth's ionosphere is the upper atmosphere of the planet. So we have the magnetic protection system, and then we have the gaseous protection system of our atmosphere. And there is a layer of basically plasma or charged particles called the ionosphere, and it's about 60 miles or 80 kilometers to about 600 kilometers above the ground. And it's also where ultraviolet light and X-rays and other, radiation and so on can create a layer of charged electrons and ionizing things and getting things really, really charged sometimes. So this is kind of the electrical part of our Earth's protection system, where electricity and ions and electrons are being dissipated and moved around, basically as a way to diffuse the stuff that's coming out from the cosmos. It's also a place that's being used for reflecting radio waves and communications around the world. So they're using this electric layer to like bounce signals around. So here's some things about the ionosphere as well. So we have its plasma. It's a plasma layer. It's ionized gaseous substance. It becomes highly electrically conductive. It absorbs solar X-rays, ultraviolet, and cosmic radiation. Absorbs and reflects. Activated by lightning discharges. It is the global atmospheric electric circuit. It is used in radio wave transference. The aurora borealis occurs in the ionosphere. It is caused by the collision of energetic electrons and protons and other heavier particles. HAARP which we will get into in a moment, was designed to interact with this area of our atmosphere specifically. And also it houses the Schumann resonances, which falls within the range of human brainwaves, precisely in the middle where alpha and theta brainwave ranges meet. So important. So here's another example of our atmosphere, just quickly to give you an example here. So the very highest area, it's the magnetosphere, that's the magnetic protection. Then right under is the ionosphere. You can see that the magnetosphere also bounces particles off. The ionosphere mostly absorbs them. And then the lower down, the ozone layer, which a lot of us have learned about in sort of fear tactics over the years about, oh, the ozone layer is dying because it screens out harmful UV radiation. I think there's been many efforts to try and fix that. I've heard that it's a lot healthier now. And then the stratosphere is where we have weather, and the troposphere is where we walk around and breathe and talk and so on. So multiple layers of filtering are going on constantly. Here's another example of that in a way to kind of give you more of an understanding of the height off of the ground. And then on the right, you can see the types of radiation and charged particles that are not making it past certain layers of our atmosphere to the ground. So infrared and visible light are making it all the way to the surface. And galactic cosmic rays are supposedly stopping right above like our troposphere, and so on. But you can see the yellow arrow here pointing at the ionosphere. It's really high up there. And above that is like the space stations and so on. You're kind of just in space. So satellites are engaging with this realm, as well as ground-based, dishes and arrays and so on. So they're actually shooting through the ionosphere and the atmosphere sometimes to satellites, or they're bouncing off of it for wherever they need to talk at the time. And so now we're getting more into the world of satellites. A lot of us are seeing that satellite phones, and Elon Musk just launched all those satellites that just follow each other through the sky, that are now taking up a major part of the traffic. And so this is going to become more of a public understanding, but there is some questions I have about how satellites work and how getting signals out to them may actually cause disturbance of our own planetary sphere. So we're going to get into that here. And I want to show you how HAARP works. So some of you may be familiar with HAARP. HAARP was created apparently in the University of Alaska with the help of the US Air Force and the US Navy, and as well as the Defense, DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. So a lot of these military and defense research and so on had created this transmitter, and I've heard that these similar arrays are actually all over the world. There's some in Russia and so on. And these transmitters will actually disturb the ionosphere in a way, kind of creating holes. And it creates irregularities in the electron density, and by heating it up, and it creates holes so that you can communicate from satellite down to the ground or up to the satellites for the most part. And then, based off of how thick or how whatever the perfect conditions are to stimulate the ionosphere to perfectly bounce your signals, that's also being done. So it's constantly being buzzed and charged and changed based off of whatever, the military and our countries and so on want to do and communicate. And so, again, this area houses the frequencies of our own brainwaves. So it is important to know about this. And here's why. Some experts have made some notes on this I wanted to share with you. So a person named Gordon J.F. McDonald, specialist in problems of warfare, says, accurately timed, artificially excited electronic strokes could lead to a pattern of oscillations, which are vibrations, that produce relatively high power levels. So really, really intense vibration over certain regions of the earth. So regions of the earth, it's a big word. You could literally stimulate the entire electric atmosphere, the ionosphere, over a whole country with these arrays potentially. So it says, in this way, one could develop a system that would seriously impair the brain performance of very large populations in selected regions over an extended period. So that's great. And then we have the US Air Force documents revealed that a system had been developed for manipulating and disrupting human mental processes through pulsed radio frequency radiation, the stuff of HARP, over large geographical areas. So this is why I study this. So it's interesting that these technologies and these operations have been going on a while, and that they can literally manipulate the mental state of the people living beneath that particular area of the ionosphere. It's important. And then there are publicly touted technologies that use this same technique, pulsed electromagnetic fields, to entrain your brain and actually change drastically some of your behaviors. And so you're actually putting a device on your own head, and through entrainment will will cause your brain waves to shift and change. And it also depends on where your brain you're doing it. And so applying this pulse magnetic field to the brain tissue can actually also enhance this. There's some positive things about this. Those are positive things too that can be done, where you can enhance areas of the brain that have been damaged through possible blood-brain bleeding and so on, or just disuse or some other issue, some other problem. So if there's an area in tissue in your brain that's not being used or is kind of lacking, they can pulse that area and it'll stimulate it and kind of help it to regrow. That's what they say. As the frequency rises, the neural activity will rise. So faster frequencies, faster brain waves, faster intense, more buzzing going on in the head. And when you have less, you relax, and you can control the mind literally using this and to lower your calorie intake and get rid of obesity. So you can actually buzz your amygdala and not be hungry if you want. But this has also been able to help people who have dementia and ALS and who have had to deal with a stroke and other brain damage. So in a way, there is a way to use this for good. So it's not all bad, but again, this is, people are being given the power to buzz their own brains and stop eating and so on. So it shows you the effectiveness of these pulsed electromagnetic fields. Okay, so let's talk about controlling your brain waves at home. I mentioned one thing earlier where they're pulsing light into your eyes to get your brain to go and match that frequency. Again, there's also something called binaural beats, which is one frequency in one ear and one frequency in the other. And when you subtract those two numbers, the difference, which here in the example is 10 hertz, that is what your brain will end up syncing to. Binaural beats are really, really helpful if you are living in an environment that is being artificially pulsed in a way. So like cities and so on, they're being artificially pulsed with other frequencies all the time. And maybe you can't sleep, maybe you can't meditate, maybe you can't ground, maybe you can't create, concentrate, study, whatever. Binaural beats have been a fantastic tool for a lot of people to actually get their brain to where they need it to be, despite the constant static around them, to get somewhere and actually accomplish what they want, because there's been so much going on that people actually need to use that process to then find a more natural state of their brains. The ideal thing is that we aren't having to compete with all of this artificial frequencies, and that we're only dealing with the planetary frequency, the geomagnetic fields of all the people around us, and the stars and so on. But no, we have way more competing factors as this day and age has evolved. Oops. So let's talk about the Schumann resonance in specific now. So I call the Schumann resonances the earth brainwaves because, again, they are the frequencies in the ionosphere in the Schumann resonances are in the range of our brainwaves. And in my opinion, even though they are diurnal, they do day and night shifts, they do seasonal shifts, I'll get into that in a second. Even though that there is a bit of a pace and there is a bit of a rhythm, in my opinion, there's a lot of overlying evidence that it's closely more related to the planetary brainwaves in a way. And the activity that's going on in that layer could be thought of as the mental plane of our own planet. I've thought about that many times. This is just me talking. So I will show you now what Wikipedia and NASA share about this information, because these are the two most popularly recognized websites about this information. And I'm going to go through it, what they share with the public, with you, just in case you never wanted to research that stuff yourself. I'll just show you what they say, and then I'll give you a couple of my own opinions about it based off of my own research. So first, let's go into Wikipedia, everybody's favorite website to get all their facts, right? So let's do it. In my opinion, when I began studying the Schumann resonances and I looked it up on Wikipedia, since then the Wikipedia has been changed many times. There's actually, I just went back and they've deleted sections and changed sections again. So I've put the most recent stuff on here, most of it, and I'm gonna show you what they're showing people. Some of it is interesting, so I'm not doing this to be spiteful or anything. This is actually, some of it is really helpful. So it says the Schumann resonances are a set of spectrum peaks in the extremely low frequency portion of the Earth's electromagnetic field spectrum. So they consider 7.83 or 7 hertz extremely low, because it literally will go, the wavelength will go 7.83 times around the entire cavity of the planet. So that's a very, very low frequency in a way, because it's not oscillating very fast. It's oscillating only 8 times before it reaches itself, or its original point, around the whole cavity of the ionosphere. Pretty crazy. It says the Schumann resonances are global electromagnetic resonances generated and excited by lightning discharges in the cavity formed by the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. So yeah, these are basically just lightning. It's another major factor of the Schumann resonances is related to lightning, because again, that's another major electrical, those are almost like if you consider going back to the brain metaphor, if you consider the neurons talking to each other and so on, there's this discharge of energy, and it does kind of look like a lightning storm as well. So that's how I like to think about it. It does make sense. And I have tracked lightning, and I don't know if the online sources for lightning are actually very accurate, because in this information I'm going to continue on with, it says that, this phenomena is helping us track lightning and lightning phenomena and so on, because that's when the Schumann resonances are getting loud. It's over certain areas of the planet. I've tried to do that myself, but I guess I don't have access to that kind of equipment, because I haven't seen as close of a correlation between lightning and Schumann resonances as I would like, but doesn't mean it's not true. I'm just saying I personally don't. I would like to see more proof on that, basically, which I haven't found yet. But I have to keep looking. So next, the global electromagnetic resonance phenomena is named after physicist Winfried Otto Schumann, who predicted it mathematically in 1952, which again, I remember reading this a few years ago, and I swear it wasn't 52, it was like in the 30s or something like that. I could be totally wrong, I could be misremembering, but for some reason I'm very stubbornly holding on to that. It's possible that they've edited the date to even move it up closer in time to make it seem like newer. But if you can imagine, even if 1952, they figured out that this thing is up there and it can, manipulate the brainwaves of the people, what have they been doing with this information for 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, 100 years? I don't even know. And it says the Schumann resonances occur because the space between the surface of the Earth and the conductive ionosphere acts as a closed waveguide. So it's a closed system. It's not perfectly closed system, or the math would be way perfect, but it is, they've gotten it decently figured out with the math and how much energy is lost. It says the Schumann resonance amplitude records show significant diurnal and seasonal variations, which in general coincide in time with the times of the day and night transition. So diurnal means day, night. So the side that's being charged by the sun is a little bit more active in the charged area of the ionosphere than the nighttime side, and so on. And then on seasonal changes, I 100% agree with that, because during fall and spring, I noticed a lot of Schumann resonance, especially spring in North America, which would be fall in the Southern Hemisphere, of course. But March has, over and over again, March and April have been very, very active. The years have been following. I get excited for that season, because I'm like, oh, I'm going to see what kind of numbers the Schumann's going to give us with this amplitude. And so the distinct peaks of the Schumann resonances, first is the fundamental is 7.83 hertz average, and then there's 14.3 or 14.1 here. It's funny because these facts are, this image is also from Wikipedia, and it's funny that the numbers aren't matching, but 14, 20, 27, 33 are the next kind of few, but there's more. And we'll get into that in a second. The next thing that Wikipedia mentions is something called Q bursts. And they've actually made this more of a thing on the page. And it's so funny for those of you who are following Q in the political realm or the conspiracy realm. It's funny that all of a sudden Q has shown up in my realm here because I get Q and 17 synchronicities all the time. So I think it's super funny. So what is a Q burst? And basically, it's this picture here on the left. I'm pretty sure this is what they're describing. It's when we see these ones that are like overlying and overlapping and obviously like overlaying the background Schumann resonance activity was just this white streak across. Here's the examples. This is back from 2018, March 8th, 2018, or March 8th. Sorry, I can't see because my little thing. March 8th. So, and March 9th was like March 19th, or was it March 9th? I think March 9th or 19th was the biggest amplitude I have ever seen. So again, that's March, that's springtime. I've seen it over and over. So these Q bursts are supposed to be caused by very, very large lightning flashes occurring over an area. And there's a distinctive signature on the charts from the background signals. These Q bursts are produced by intense lightning strikes that transfer large amounts of charge from the clouds to the ground and carry a high peak current. It's a very, very strong current. And so they can exceed the amplitude of the background signal by a factor of 10 or more. We've seen that many times, and with an interval of 10 seconds, which allows them to be considered an isolated event and determine the source lightning location. So over Russia, because this chart is from Russia, for example, this could have been a moment where they were having a lightning storm, which makes sense, again, with the seasons, with the changing of the troposphere and the movement of water and storms and so on, that again, during the spring, over Russia, there's more lightning going on. It makes sense. It is now believed that many of the Schumann resonance transients, Q bursts, are related to transient luminous events, which are a lightning anomaly, basically, that are very fascinating. They call them sprites even, and they're produced by positive cloud ground lightning occurring in the stratoswarm region of a thunderstorm. And they can also influence the Schumann resonances. So these sprites are a very interesting phenomena. In a way, they're kind of mysterious on their own, and they are using the Schumann resonance in a way, they say, to now understand the sprites more and predict them more, which is very interesting. So not only is Earth dealing with the Schumann resonance, but other planets and moons, the existence of a Schumann resonance-like condition is available with two factors here. So you need to have a planet or a moon with a closed planetary-sized, approximately spherical cavity consisting of conducting lower and upper boundaries, separating by an insulating medium. For the Earth, the conducting lower boundary is its surface, and the upper boundary is the ionosphere. Other planets may have similar electrical conductivity geometry, so it is speculated that they should possess similar resonant behavior. 2, a source of electrical excitation of electromagnetic waves in the ELF range. So within the solar system, there are 5 candidates for Schumann resonance detections beside Earth. So we've got Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Saturn's biggest moon, Titan. Modeling Schumann resonances on the planets and the moons of the solar system is complicated, and with a lack of knowledge in waveguide parameters. So it's hard if you're not actually on the surface of that planet in there, at least according to Wikipedia, to measure the Schumann resonances on these places to get valid results. So just thought you might want to know that in case you didn't know that this is a phenomenon that can occur on many other bodies. And so those bodies that have Schumann resonances also may be a hint that life and mammalian and brain inhabiting creatures can live there and be in tune with those particular bodies. Is very interesting. Hold on. I'm going to move this again because I can't see. Okay, so, and this is from NASA. So NASA's information about this pretty much includes the same things that Wikipedia is talking about, but there's a few extra things on here. So they mentioned that there are about 2,000 thunderstorms, thunder lightning storms that roll over the earth at any given moment, and they can produce up to 50 flashes of lightning every second. So that's a lot of input of information, a lot of disturbance in a way in the Schumann resonance, in the cavity there. Each lightning burst creates electromagnetic waves that begin to circle around the planet like they show here in the picture. And yeah, it is captured in this boundary, which we've talked about now. It's about 60 miles up. This boundary from Earth surface to about 60 miles, which is pretty high. And some of these wavelengths will begin to combine with each other, and they will increase in strength and repeat, and they will pile up on each other. And it's also a useful tool to analyze Earth's weather because, of course, we want to know what this thunder and lightning storms are doing and where they're going. That's a very popular thing for people to want to know. And also, it even talks about all the way down to the atoms in our atmosphere. It can talk about and give us information about all that. These waves aren't necessarily the same as like an ocean wave, but metaphorically, we use ocean and so on to kind of understand how these waves work. But they oscillate with regions of greater and lesser energy. The waves aren't exactly uniform. They're kind of dotting all over the place and smashing into each other all at random ways and random times all the time. And yes, the sweet spot for resonance requires the wave to be as long or 3 or 2 times as long as the circumference of the Earth. And then that's why it's such an extremely low frequency, because again, it's only going 8 rotations. The frequency is only going 8 rotations before it hits itself again around the whole cavity. And it's a lower frequency than most of our technology, like your radios and so on. It was measured reliably in the 60s. It was predicted in the 50s, apparently, even though I remember it being like the 20s and the 30s. And then they were able to understand this correspondence between the seasons and the aerosols in the atmosphere and other earthbound phenomena, which I really like. So these two popular sources basically agree on what they're talking about, but it is funny to me how this is literally the entirety of what NASA puts on their website about this phenomenon. And what I showed you about Wikipedia, that's basically the entirety of what they're putting out there publicly. So in my opinion, I feel like that there could be textbooks and textbooks of information about this phenomenon, but that's what I'm trying to do here. So one other thing I wanted to show you just quickly, in case you didn't know, is the very, very basics of frequency science, just to kind of understand what 8 hertz means as an example, or 7.83 hertz means, because I've noticed one of the biggest issues is people making these mistakes, which is fine. If you don't have the education background in this stuff, that's totally cool. But it's very, very simple. And I would encourage you, when you see people maybe making mistakes about using hertz instead of measurement of amplitude, when they talk about the Schumann, just to be like, hey, you're actually, hertz isn't what you're seeing here. You're actually seeing amplitude. So here is what does frequency mean? What is hertz? So it's 1 cycle per second. So basically, per second, how many times is something cycling? And we actually this diagram I like the best because in my opinion, I see frequencies as kind of a spiraling circle. That's the model that I'm aware of and you can see here. But a lot of the time we only see the flat version. So you think that frequency literally is just like a line that goes like this through space. But in my opinion, it kind of goes like this. And it's actually, you're actually watching a rotation happen instead of as much of a wave like in the ocean. Frequency is measured in hertz. And what frequency is, so it's how many rotations per second. So again, Schumann resonance is 7.83 rotations per second. It's going to, per second around the whole planet, basically, it's going to go 7.83 times this particular frequency. Then amplitude is the power, it is the height of the wave, it's how big that circle is, basically. It's still going to only rotate 8 times, but if your circle is this big versus your circle being like this big, the intensity of that frequency hitting you is going to be much bigger and much more noticeable. And so amplitude really is what I like to study because it is the power and the intensity of that frequency that's constantly there. Like they say, the cavity is there from the surface of the planet to the ionosphere. That's not going to really change. And so the frequencies around there and how many times that is going to rotate in that space is not going to change very much. So those frequencies aren't rising as much as they're getting more amplitude and more power. And you can test that or see amplitude by the height of a wavelength, just like you can see here. And so a high frequency has more rotations in a certain amount of time than a lower frequency. And a high amplitude frequency will have a much bigger circle or a much higher pitch to their rotation during the second that it does its thing. I hope that makes more sense. This is very, very basic science, but again, it's kind of hard because again, I feel like this isn't a very commonly discussed thing. It's just kind of like a tossed around word, but frequency is very important to this study. So if you're interested, I hope that this was helpful in kind of giving you a little bit more of a background on the logic behind the stuff that I write on my blog and so on. So here is another quote here, and it's about the Schumann resonance being an essential factor for life on Earth. And the quote says, NASA has been using this knowledge to protect astronauts while they are outside the Earth's natural source. The physical condition of early astronauts deteriorated severely while in outer space, away from the Schumann resonance. The problem was solved by introducing the Schumann simulator into all space shuttles, a magnetic pulse generator mimicking the Earth's frequency. This demonstrates the simple fact that we cannot be healthy if disconnected from the natural biological frequency. So again, very, very important to our environment and to our lives, and to that they need it, just like food and water and air when they're floating around in space. They need a little makeshift fake Earth sound box or frequency box that will keep their rhythms, their rhythms and their brains and everything from having nothing to really bounce off of. And that was, I read, was the issue, was that like they were lost, and there was like this feeling of total lack of wanting to do anything, and really big levels of discomfort and so on. And I heard they actually tested this by going really, really deep underground, which again is out of the range of the cavity of the Schumann resonances. So they weren't getting it under there. And I guess that also was how they figured this out. But in this quote, it says they figured it out by putting out people in space and they went nuts. I don't know what's actually true there, but I just wanted to give you all that information. You do with it what you like. And I'm quoting myself now on this next slide. It says, many authors of esoteric content will use the Schumann resonances to help explain mystical and human consciousness phenomena, myself included. Please always take these as opinions and feel the truth for yourself. So this is just my little disclaimer, because as I literally was one of the very first people to ever start blogging about this in the English speaking internet world. Because I looked for it before I began, because I wanted to talk to people about it before I started, because I was shy. And then it was just like, it wasn't really much for me. So I was just like, I'm just going to start. I'm going to make this a personal study, and then I'm going to allow people to participate if they want. And since then, of course, we've grown a huge community of people who give me feedback all the time, while I still continue to give feedback, and I'm learning myself. I'm using this for my own self. But now there's all of these other bloggers, some people who have literally copied and pasted my style and begun doing it themselves. And then obviously you can copy paste my style, but your own replies and your own responses and your own communities, they're going to be different. And I really don't mind, because it's very flattering that I made something that was so easy for people to be like, I'm going to take this and use it for my own growth and my own blog and my own community. It's pretty awesome. But then there's people who are taking this phenomena and using the wrong scientific terms, and they're basically just making claims that are very much on the more, I would say, the less grounded in science, or in like where you can actually test for these things that they're saying. It's more so out of a faith thing, or out of downloads or dreams or so on, which is totally fine. And all of those aspects of taking in information I value. And I just have been kind of, in a way, feeling this obligation to talk to people who do try to use the science, but they're using it by accident incorrectly. And then there's people who aren't using science to explain or share the Schumann resonances, and they're going completely off of their own interpretation of what they think happened during those Q bursts, and or whatever you want to call them. I like to call them Schumann blasts, but now I guess they're calling them Q bursts potentially, which is just all of a sudden just a major blast of lightning, which could be a blast of a particle beam from a spaceship. Like, it could be either. So, you know, I want it. I want to know what everyone's opinions are about this. That's why I keep such an open forum, because I want to know what everyone's feeling and thinking, because I honestly believe all of those things are likely happening on some level. So it's been fun. But again, please just take it in not as full truths, and be discerning with what you hear about the Schumann resonance in these reports, because I've seen things go way out there and people be very, very concerned and upset. And I've had to talk people down and be like, it's okay. Like, the world didn't turn on and off again probably, and you aren't going to die. Like, everything's going to be okay. You aren't going to get fried by the Schumann tomorrow. These anxieties come up. So that's why I've held the space so long, because people are constantly coming upon this information with questions and concerns. So here's some Schumann esoterica that I've gathered for all of you. You've probably heard a few of these things. So I say people who claim to work with intuitive gifts and energies, myself included, tend to gravitate towards the Schumann resonances for many reasons. This is something I've noticed. So it's for making sense of discomfort and euphoria when it's out of the blue, relating it to the activity to ascension, the term ascension, or consciousness awakenings, which is, again, a very spiritual term, and relating activity to intelligent beings on other planes of existence. I've heard that many times, and I will be honest with you, I feel that that is an aspect of this, and I'm still learning why, remembering why, or maybe becoming more confident with how I feel about that. It's fun though. And then we have relating activity to secret or otherworldly technologies, which is, again, something I'm very much involved with, putting pressure on, is the release of all of these secrets that have been held. Again, Schumann resonance stuff has been known about since the 50s, if not earlier. And so that information, something that could stimulate our brainwaves, has been known, or at least publicly declared, since the 50s. So usually they say in the military, they don't tell you something until they're like 20 years ahead. So it makes me wonder. Okay, so now we're going to get into more of how to utilize the Schumann resonances and the charts for our own good. I have a question. I'm just going to read into the chat, because I'm seeing a lot of chat all of a sudden. Okay, now I got to figure out how to close the chat. It's weird, because it's like when I open this, my mouse disappears. Okay. Anyways, Looks like you guys are fine. I'm just gonna, I was gonna say, maybe we should just take a brief break, just a 1 moment. Is that okay with everybody? I'm trying to, my thing is freezing on me. That's a good time to take a break. It's when everything starts to freeze. What the heck? Wow, I can't even get out of here. Oh, here we go. Okay, good. She's good. She's fine. Okay, do you guys want to take a break or are you still good to go? Break or no? Break or no? What are we feeling? Maybe put it in the chat. Up to you. Okay, I'm still good. I'm still good, so we can keep going. All right. You guys are fine. All right, sweet, sweet, sweet. Just checking. I gotta check in on everyone. I get a little, I'm only looking at the slides right now. I'm not really seeing you guys, so I just need to make sure I'm checking in. Okay. This is where we're gonna get into some of the more fun parts. So we have the brain waves here. So I've already been talking about this a bunch, but here's some actual data to kind of show you and visualize this. So here are the graphs. There's the brainwave chart on the top, and then there's the actual Schumann resonance spectrum peaks, which I mentioned earlier. I got this graphic. It used to be on Wikipedia, and now it's from some other paper. It's actually been translated into a couple languages. But you can see here that the first peak, you can see the little 7.8. That's the primary Schumann resonance frequency. The next one is 14, then 20, 26, 33, 39, 45. And I've actually seen at the very end a 60, which is kind of like the end, like that's the wall in a way. And so now looking up at the brainwave chart, I'd invite you to read underneath gamma, beta, alpha, theta, delta, the numbers that are stated here. And so maybe going down to delta, which is below 4 hertz. Again, delta is sleeping, so that's below the primary frequency of the Schumann resonances. So we're sleeping when the Schumann resonances are less, you know, in a way, when our brains can be calm at that time. And then we go up to theta state, which is where they say from theta to alpha is where the Schumann resonances really stimulate. So in theta state, that's where, again, extremely low frequency. So this is when your brain, again, is really calm. It's barely vibrating in a way. And it's going from like 4 hertz to 8 hertz. So that is where the first Schumann resonance frequency is. That's where the planetary frequency chills, is where humans feel meditative, raw emotionally, and that is a state where we want to be. This is where we almost need to be on a daily basis to be able to balance and integrate our own brains and thoughts. And theta state, yeah, again, can be achieved by meditation. I really hope that you are trying to reach theta state multiple times a day through deep breathing and a little bit of alone time, because it's extremely important for your health. But if you think about it, if the 7.8 Schumann resonance gets really high amplitude one day and we entrain to that in a way because it's so loud that it takes over our own consciousness, then it's only taking over our consciousness and bringing us to a place of meditation. It's bringing us to a place of, in a way, receptivity and coherence and connection, which is a pretty beautiful thing. And then the secondary frequency is 14, and that's where you get into the alpha brainwave state, which is a little bit more stimulated, but you're still relaxed, you're daydreaming, you're thinking, you're pondering, you're reflecting. And then we go into beta, which is the third Schumann resonance frequency, in a way, in that range. And that is where we're alert. We're getting our work done. We're getting tasks done. We're moving through our day and so on. We're driving, you know, it's usually kind of where we're making sure we're not going to get hit by a car or forget to eat or stuff like that. And so that is the third Schumann resonance. And then the fourth Schumann resonance is kind of just, it is also in that state. It's in a higher beta state. So when it gets into the higher Schumann resonance in the fourth, or the green line on the Russian chart, which we'll talk about in a second, the 26 hertz, that's when we start getting into a higher beta wave state. And that's when we're kind of a little stressed out. That's when things are a little like, ooh, like you're feeling it, you're buzzing on the energies for sure. And the green line on the Schumann resonance charts on the Russian chart, I've noticed, is one of the most uniquely moving lines. And if you think about it, when you want your populace to be stressed out and not thinking properly, you could just stimulate somehow the fourth Schumann resonance, and it can cause this in our brain waves. So just a thought. And then we have gamma waves. So this is again where we're getting heightened perception. So this is really high functioning brain. This is where people are starting to get, they're learning, they're perceiving a lot, they're downloading a lot, they're getting good REM sleep. And again, that is in the range of the last parts of the Schumann resonance. So really all of our brain waves possible, all the brain waves are really possible of hitting are in the range of our own planetary like cavity. So pretty interesting correlation. Okay, so now I'm going to discuss this source of live data. So if you want to watch what the Schumann resonance is doing, because your brain waves are something you care about, and you've learned that there's technologies and that there's environmental factors that can stimulate the ionosphere, therefore stimulate your own brain. So maybe watching the Schumann resonances once in a while, especially if you're really feeling chaotic and you don't know why, or you're feeling amazing and you don't know why, it's a good source to look at. And literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people are looking at this source now since I started. And I've looked on the time machine. Is it called the time machine or the Wayback Machine? I've had someone look at this website, and they were able to get data from this website from right before December 21st, 2012, when the Mayan calendar was supposed to end. They got it from the 19th. So I couldn't get that day for some reason. It's like nobody saved it on the internet anymore, or maybe they just shut it off during that time, and from the 19th till whenever. But this chart has been on for a while, but now it's, in my opinion, way more popular. And I have to give you the disclaimer that I do believe that these live data sources for the solar weather and for the Schumann resonances, basically all of these environmental factors and charts I'm showing you, could easily be manipulated and edited before they are publicly released. They do it for reasons of basically protection of, the people, and for Department of Defense and so on. These are the excuses they have. So there is a filter, in my opinion, of this data before it's actually reaching the public eye. So I just want you to know that, but I'm going to teach you how to read this stuff in case you don't know. So you can still monitor your brainwaves, because it's not entirely inaccurate, in my opinion, but we'll see if it continues to remain mysteriously inaccurate at times. So, like I mentioned before, and that's the link, just in case you want the link to the actual site where it's loading every hour, the overall chart here, that's the link. And then we have the frequency chart. So there is multiple charts on this site. Each of them measures something slightly different about the Schumann resonance frequencies. This is the frequency chart. This is related to the brainwave chart. So if you want to check what's going on in a way, specifically at every hour, what frequencies are being stimulated, at least for the first 4 Schumann resonances, they have that option. But these frequencies, they don't change too much. Like the first one is the white one. That is 7.83 average. You can see here on the top left, the highest number it goes up to is an 8.07. And I've seen 8.8 as the highest difference from 7.83. I think it was 8.8 during a large blast. So again, this cavity that we're in is mathematically 7.83 is the average, but like they said, it's not a perfect cavity. So there is a little bit of a variation on those numbers. The second one is the 14 line, the yellow one. And this is consistent through all the charts. These colored lines, they do represent the same frequency on multiple different charts. It's just what they're measuring in each chart that matters. So this one, we are looking at the specific frequency adjustments of those frequencies. So the 14, you can see it bounces around and it goes as low as 12.6 and it goes as high as 14.3. You can see here on the yellow numbers on the right-hand side, my right-hand side. I don't know if I'm actually giving you the right directions. Hopefully I that would be funny. But yes, so again, the first one is more related to our theta brainwaves. Second one is in the range 14 of around alpha to beta brainwaves. Third one is in the beta brainwave. And the fourth one is around the beta brainwave. So a lot of this stuff is actually stimulating around the alpha beta waking state most of the time. Then we have the amplitude chart, which is my favorite. So again, those four that I said, 7, 14, 21, 23, 24-ish, those colors are still relevant here. So the white is the 7.83, but now we're measuring amplitude. And unfortunately, this has been the biggest issue in the community, is that both this website and HeartMath, which I'm going to get to in a second, two very popular, and the Italian one, three very popular sites for seeing Schumann resonance around the world at certain locations, they don't place a unit of measurement for their amplitude. And it used to say on the Wikipedia page, which I don't think is there anymore, that the amplitude can be measured, the amplitude can be measured in two ways, microvolts or nanotesla, if I'm remembering that properly. I've said it a few times, so I'm sure if it's a mistake, it's totally by accident, but so I cannot tell you the units of the amplitude when I write my reports, and it's frustrating because then people think it's hertz. They just assume it's hertz. They assume, as you can see here on the top left, that 59 you can see, they'll say, oh, the Schumann resonance had 59 hertz today. And you're like, nope, that's not what I read from that same chart you're sharing. Amplitude is not measured in hertz. Like I just showed you, amplitude is the power behind the frequency, or the width of the circle, the rotating frequency circle that's flying around the cavity of the earth, of the atmosphere or whatever. So, and the bottom is time, obviously. So this is the amplitude chart. It measures the amplitude of the first four frequencies of the Schumann resonance. Oftentimes you'll see here when a blast comes in or a Q burst or whatever, the amplitude of the first four frequencies will tend to look the same, like they'll have a similar waveform. And that's because, again, they're all together up there and they're all bouncing off each other and building off of each other. And it's this mathematical, there's a mathematical understanding to how these peaks are happening. But even here, you can see the green line is behaving independently. And in a way, very less so compared to the other three. I've noticed this over and over, and I'm just showing you this. This is just an observation I've made. Again, that is in the high beta brainwave state. But during this blast, you can see in the green on the right-hand side, it didn't get that high in amplitude. It maybe got to a 7 amplitude. But the 7.83, which is that theta state of brainwaves where you're kind of meditative and at peace, that hit a 59 amplitude. It hit the highest amplitude of all of them. But the one down, the 14, which is a little bit more of a aroused brain, that hit an amplitude of 22. So there is some power there, and there is some competing, in a way, signals for your brain. And so it's fascinating to see how each wave that comes in and each frequency shift that happens, how we actually behave, because it's such a dance. It's more complex than it is. I'm trying to explain it in a simple way, but it is complex. And that's why I've been studying it for so long, because I still have questions. Then we have the Schumann chart at the bottom. So this is time by hertz. This one is literally measured in hertz. On the left-hand side, you can see on the top left, there's a little marking. It's hertz in Russian. Those are the units they use in Russian. This is a Russian chart. Makes sense? It starts at 0, which is, for us, brainwave 0, you're dead. For the planet, you can see that it's basically a black line also. Right at 0, there's like just a little black space. And it's funny because it's just like, oh, of course, we're not quite at 0. We're never at 0, but right below, like right above 0 is when activity really starts to go. So from maybe 2 hertz or 1 hertz, there is activity going on. And it can go, some of the blasts go from 1 hertz or 0 hertz, but never really 0, even though I do say 0 in my charts. If you look, there's really nothing going on at 0 if you zoom in, but from like 1, and the bottom of this chart is 40 hertz. It goes all the way, this measures the amplitude of 0 to 40 hertz in a very, very stylistic way. It's like a thermograph. The white means it's hot or high amplitude, high power. Dark blue and black means there's no power. There's very low power. And oftentimes, unfortunately, like I showed you in the other slides, here you can see on the bottom, on the right-hand side, bottom right, there is frequencies like 45 hertz. And then I mentioned there's also 60. So even in Schumann resonance spectrum peak science, it's not being covered in this Russian graph. Like the wholeness of the Schumann resonances, in my opinion, isn't being properly measured publicly and shared. And it's frustrating because, again, blasts of amplitude will show on this chart stimulating 1 to 40, and then even beyond 40 hertz. But I can't properly share the data because, again, we cannot see past 40 hertz. And it's frustrating. It's been frustrating, but we try. And for example, here, that little blob you see on the right-hand side, you can see the top of that blob maybe is at like 1 hertz. And so 1 hertz, and then that blob extends, really, let's just look at the white part of the blob and then track your finger to the left. It hits about a 16 to about a 20, the whiteness. So that's the power. The hottest it can get is white. So once it starts going white, you don't really know how much more powerful it's really getting without looking at the amplitude chart, which is above. And in the range of 1 to 20 is the 7.83, which we can see the readings for in the white line on the amplitude chart here on the top. That's the 7.83 behavior. So that was, at least according to this, that's the most power that we can measure, is what was going on with that frequency. But is it the whitest part of this chart? I don't know. Unfortunately, this chart, again, only measures the amplitude of 4 specific frequencies and not the in-between. But in the bottom chart, it shows you the summary of all this energy coming in, and there's a lot missing. It's hard to interpret. So again, there are some frustrations, and I have my complaints about this chart sometimes, but it's served a lot, and I am grateful for it. And it has helped a lot of people because, again, you can see over hour 21 here on the bottom, or 20 to hour 1 in Tomsk, Russia time, which is universal time +7. I live in -8 right now. So it's almost a 24-hour or 12-hour difference between me and them. So it's actually kind of easy for me to read these charts. People in the UK and in Australia, they have a little bit of a harder time getting the timings right. And I get those questions all the time. And I love my people from around the world, but it is frustrating to continually try and help people like figure out what time zone and so on. But once you get it, I would advise pick one number on the chart that you know the conversion for. So for me, I've picked number 16. 16 for me usually is around 3 a.m., which again is when often I'd notice, because again, that is, if it's diurnal, that's when the energy is shifting from one side of the planet to the other. The sun is really now, one side is much darker and it's quiet on this side, and the sun is blasting the other side of the earth. So I noticed the Schumann blast kind of happened during that time, and it makes sense. But also it keeps people up at night sometimes because they're so sensitive, even if they're on the other side of the planet. It's just fascinating. So here is another source for you, heartmath.org, if you've never heard of it. The heartmath.org has its MO of trying to cover a global coherence and monitor the global coherence using magnetometers and from different parts of the planet, as well as teaching people to help bridge a connection between their heart geomagnetic field or magnetic field and their brain as well, their mind, and trying to get a coherence between those two places. That's what they kind of specialize on. But they do have sites set up in multiple places around the world, not just Russia, which is the most popular one most of us use. Ironically, everything going on in Russia somehow seems to translate to people in North America on the opposite side of the world, which is cool. But it also shows that the cavity is open and that we are affected by the energy that's going around the whole cavity. Even though it started in one spot, it's being spread and catching up on itself around the whole cavity. We can all pick up on it, in my opinion, because it's there in our atmosphere. And so this location measures, this website measures about 6 locations. And unfortunately, as fun as it has been to watch these, lately I've noticed especially this website has been blocking out information, as well as the Russian one, but this one especially has been blocking out and just zeroing out certain stations around the world. So I used to report on this more, but it's been so inconsistent. Unfortunately, it wasn't pleasurable for me to continually look it up and then see black. And you're like, well, that was a waste of my time. And again, another frustration with this, I'm not trying to focus on the negatives here either, but this is important in a way because I am trying to pursue the truth. When you come against roadblocks, it makes you wonder, and it does stop you, and it can frustrate your momentum in a way. It can stall you. One thing I noticed with this is that, as you can see here on the very center, there's this little square. If you can see my mouse, and you can see each of the locations are color coordinated here, and at the bottom is the site key. So for example, this dark purple line is South Africa, and this right here is South Africa as well. These are 2 different versions basically of the same information. You can see the white hotness, just like this chart back here. They're doing a similar thing with amplitude. There's more hotness, there's a whiter color, and so on. But in the line chart, it basically just goes over time and it measures power, in quotes, of the frequencies from 0.3 to 36 hertz. So the power of that range of frequencies is being measured. And so the power of that range of frequencies is not a unit. We don't have a unit for this power again. And so people will look up this site and see this number for South Africa as they are having a peak. They're definitely getting an influx of energy in South Africa, which again, I say happens often. They're usually the winners. It just seems to be a part of the mechanics of our Earth. And maybe explains why South Africa is such a wild place sometimes. And who knows, maybe some of it is artificial. We can ask these questions now. But here you can see that it says 619, a power of 619. And I'll show you back here, the amplitude here is a 59, and that's pretty high. Like the highest I've ever seen it on the Russian chart is to 190, it boggles my mind, but that did happen in March 2018, and it was incredible and was quite the day. And that was also when a bunch of like Ascension YouTubers and channelers and so on were like, the event is happening and things are happening and energy's happening and everything's gonna change. And that it did. That energy came in and the world changed just like it did, just like the weather. It's just like predicting a hurricane in a way. A hurricane comes and it goes and it changes things forever, It's simple in my mind sometimes. It's not as over the time. It used to be more exciting and a little nerve-wracking, but now I've noticed that there's more of a rhythm. It's more like the weather. Really, I've survived weather all my life, and I've survived all of these frequencies all my life, even without knowing them, and most of us have. So the fear there, in my opinion, is not as healthy to focus on. And also these numbers as well as a way of like arguing their facts about the Schumann resonances and the energies on Earth are rising and the frequencies are rising is the major argument. And it's like, no, these frequencies are really the same, very similar to the way that they have to be based on the mechanics of the container they're in, but the power behind them is changing. And now we have 2 sites that are popular that are not posting the same measurement of power. So things get really confusing and people start arguing and throwing numbers everywhere. And it's been fun to watch. And I'm glad that I've been able to kind of suss out some of the information and the logic and maybe kind of bring some coherence to that, because I've noticed it can get a little chaotic sometimes. So a 619 versus a 190, huge, huge, huge difference. So in my opinion, both sites are measuring with a different type of amplitude measurement. One might be microvolts and one might be nanotesla. Just, I thought I'd please keep that in mind for when you are looking at these numbers in the future. Okay, so is the Schumann resonance rising, was what everybody is wanting to know. And so there's somebody, an artist, whom I've become friends with, even though we haven't met, through social media, who has taken on a project. She calls it Schumann Recap. She's got a Twitter and an Instagram that I'm aware of, maybe even a website now. But she has created a calendar format of the Schumann resonances. So through the calendar of a month, she's put the Schumann resonance reading of that day in a grid. And so this is the example. Now, she, at the end of the year, she also released a yearly calendar of what it looked like in the past. So I've got 2018 here on the right, and I've got 2019 on the left. We're about to be done this year. I'm going to get to see the 2020 results. But here I'm showing you in a grander look, compared to each of those years. If you can look for the color white versus the color blue, for example, or the color green maybe, you can see overall that there isn't a very big difference between these 2 years, in my opinion, to my eye. Your opinion may be different. I'd like to hear that. But I'm seeing here that the situation in both those years is pretty similar looking. And that gives me hope that there is, there is definitely energy, and there's energy influxes happening, and storms and lightning and whatever else, solar storms. But overall, it doesn't seem like drastically year by year there is an extension or an expansion of whiteout moments of amplitude versus blue, in my opinion. But I thought I'd show you this as an example. It's kind of some proof based off of at least this one source of the behavior of the Schumann resonance amplitude over years. We're going to keep watching, though. This is definitely a study that's going to continue. So here is some resources now on how you can track the Schumann resonance yourself. I've mentioned the Schumann bot. I'm actually wearing the Schumann bot shirt, as are one of you, which is great. I bought their shirt before I started making my own content, my own shirts, because I literally saw their shirt come up and I was like, bruh, that is the exact shirt I was literally about to make. And I was shocked. I was like, wow, like, so funny how this kind of group of people who are doing this work seem to kind of think and create in a similar way. It's been a fun human experiment to see the types of people who want to make and work with this stuff. But I bought the shirt because I was like, well, it's a beautiful thing. I was going to make it for myself, and I ended up making one very similar for my own wardrobe because I wanted a sweater and I wanted to expand on that design. And I actually started doing this before the Schumann bot. So I was like, I don't mind. It's okay. They don't mind either. I've sent a lot of people to their Twitter, and they've been having some issues lately with their Twitter, I've heard, but they'll tweet. There's a bot. It'll tweet it's been programmed to tweet the Schumann resonance Russian site every hour. So even if you're passively like living your life and then boom, you get a tweet on the hour, you open it, you look at the Schumann resonance and it's blasting, that's awesome, because then you can check in with yourself. And you can go, okay, how am I feeling right now? And you can even watch like what frequencies the blast is hitting with that chart, with this colorful chart. You can see, is it going from 0 to 40, or is it going 0 to 20, which only means a certain amount of your brainwave activity is can be really affected. And you can get scientific with it if you want. It's called a biofeedback, actually, is when you kind of use a machine to reflect on your own state. They do it with brainwave training too. They'll show you a screen of your brainwaves live, and then you'll try and get your brainwaves to adjust by watching the feedback on the screen. It's similar kind of use for this. So like if you're having a moment where you're like totally high beta, don't know why, you're stressed, and then you check the Schumann's blasting in those frequencies, in the high beta frequencies, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. That's kind of what I like using this for, and what I want to keep empowering others to do. Another resource is this app called Schumann Resonance. I did not make it, but I have been in contact with the developer, and now my information to my blog, my group, and my Facebook page and my Instagram, I think, are all in this app. And I've actually gained followers and people from this app totally from outside source. It's been awesome. I really wanted to make my own app, but this person beat me to it. Their name is Alexander. They call themselves Alex. I was like, okay, we're all working on a team. You know, it's kind of hard to resist another Alex out there. So I'm like, yeah, and we're cooperating. I may even make an app with him one day, but that's another source I'd recommend. It's 99 cents. And I check that one often. I'll wake up and I'll look at it. Like whenever I want to check the Schumann, instead of pulling up my Safari and going through 100 tabs and finding my Russian website tab, I just open this, and it at least gives me some context, and then I can go into researching more and gathering more data if there is something on there that interests me. Oh yeah, I went into biofeedback therapy too soon. So in the in the dictionary it says biofeedback is the technique of making the unconscious or involuntary body processes such as heartbeats or brainwaves perceptible to your senses, so like your eyes, as by the use of an oscilloscope in order to manipulate them so an oscilloscope is measuring your heartbeat. And in a way, there are other machines that will measure your brainwaves. I'm forgetting the name for some reason all of a sudden, but I should know that. But anyways, you know what I'm talking about. So it makes you capable of actually changing and mentally controlling your own unconscious body processes, which is cool because what is the whole process is making the unconscious conscious allows you to have more of a leverage on your own reality, in my opinion. So it's very empowering and can be used this way. So, okay. So now that we're empowered and we kind of know how to read the charts, hopefully a little better, and that made all sense, I'm going to now look into a couple environmental factors that are influencing you in a way that may not be in your best interest. So, as my example I chose is this very chaotic electromagnetic light spectrum chart to show you what sort of, here on the bottom, what sort of human stuff we use that is operating in certain frequency bandwidths. And then you can see how often that those frequency bandwidths are constantly pulsing around you. So here on the left, you can see bottom left, we get sound waves. These are, in a way, the slower frequencies here. Sound waves are very slow. But not even as slow as a Schumann resonance. It goes from 20 hertz or 10 to 20, 20 hertz to like 10,000 hertz. And then we have the AM radio, and then we have ultrasound technology to actually put frequencies on your belly and see a child inside and hope that they don't get too affected by that influence. And then we have radio towers and TVs and then phones. And when we're going to the right, these frequencies are getting faster, and in a lot of ways they're getting, like, their amplitudes depend, but on the top you can see the size. So the first one is a football field size of the frequencies, and then these frequencies are getting to the height of a person, and then a baseball, and then a paperclip. So these wavelengths are changing in height, and they're changing in how fast they're going. So phones, and then we're going into wireless data, they're going 2.4 gigahertz. Frequencies getting faster, and then we're getting into screening at the airport, and then we're getting into fiber optics and the visible light spectrum and remotes and night vision and suntan lotion and dental curing, and then we're getting into x-rays and baggage screenings, and then we're getting into PET imaging, which is a brain imaging, and then we've got cosmic rays. So those are the very, very quickest, intense, and in a way smallest frequencies, because they're going so fast. They have to be very small to like get that many rotations per second. So these are some environmental factors that are, constantly around you, at least for most people who are living in a city or in the range of a cell phone or a TV. You're getting some of this stuff, some people more than others for sure, but these are a lot of other competing factors in your environment that you can't physically see. And so they can be forgotten and disregarded. And then in a way, what you cannot see can also be manipulated without you knowing. And there's ways to know, but if you're not as in tune with your own body and with your own awareness of frequency, which you can do through studying and following the Schumann resonances and feeling how those frequencies make you feel, then when you start feeling that, and then you look at the Schumann and you look at the solar weather and there's nothing, then your brain goes, okay, what else? What else in my environment is maybe causing me to have this disturbance? And you can turn off your Wi-Fi. You can get out of town. Maybe you went and got an x-ray. Maybe your neighbor's using their microwave, it's things like that. There's so many things, but being aware of them is the beginning of the awareness, right? We're bringing the unconscious to conscious. Okay, another environmental factor that can affect you and the Schumann resonances I've noticed is also the moon cycle. And this month in particular is to be mentioned that we had a full moon on the 1st, and we're having a full moon on the 31st of October, and we're having a new moon on the 16th, I believe. So that's a lot. That's a lot in 1 month, and that's a lot of energy movement and shifting with the moon. The moon plays a very interesting part. It's its own massive conspiracy, but as a satellite, it does affect us on a major, major level, especially women with our menstrual cycles. And so paying attention to the moon has been a major cue I've been getting over and over and over. The calendar I have is a lunar calendar. It just shows me the lunar cycle. Now it's just, I pay very close attention to it. And I'm learning more about the astrology now too, with what each moon can bring energetically with a theme, which is really cool. Another factor that involves and shifts our energy, like I mentioned, is the equinoxes and the solstices. So these are the changing of the seasons. This is how much exposure the sun is giving certain areas of the planet. That's a major amount of energy moving around during those seasonal changes. Then we have eclipses. Eclipses are huge. Everybody I know who talks about this kind of energy stuff and energy work, they're very aware and get very excited and always write articles during eclipses. There is this, mysterious kind of esoteric side of eclipses, and then there's the physical sort of mechanical side of an eclipse. But in a way, it does cause the energy of the sun sometimes to not be able to fully access our realm, and then sometimes the energy of the sun can no longer access the realm of the moon. So these are two very, very interesting phenomena. Either it's a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse, but both of which I've noticed are trademarks and markers in the year for when, again, there is like a collective conscious shift for something. There's always, you can look back in history and there's always like something big that happens during these times, I've noticed. Again, I mentioned Lionsgate earlier, when Sirius is in alignment with our planet during August 8th. And it talks about the great central sun, and there's galactic gates and so on. And then this kind of gets into the esoteric side of astrology and so on. But these gateways and these portals and openings and closings are very mechanical in themselves too. And again, that's why they know on August 8th, the mechanics of our solar system and of our galaxy are going to align us with Sirius. And then the mystery schools and so on over many times, obviously the pyramids are an excellent example, are involved with these gateways and these openings. So again, these are times when I've noticed major community feedback about shifts in their lives. So we're going to talk about ascension symptoms really fast, because this is a really popular term I've noticed, and ascension symptoms can be used to describe, in a way, I've noticed a lot of the time when the Schumann resonance is going off or the solar weather, people will say they're having ascension symptoms because, again, they're having energetic shifts that are changing their lives, changing their consciousness, changing their bodies. And people will sometimes connect that to an actual growth and an evolution within a lifetime of raising your vibration, raising your conscious awareness, bringing the unconscious to conscious. So when we're bringing our unconscious to conscious, there are some feedbacks and from our system, and there is a little bit of tension and things that need to be smoothed out. And so here on my left, I have some memes to describe the like two extremes that I tend to see during the Schumann resonance stuff, which is you can't move and you're exhausted and you're tired and you have no idea really what's going on, and you basically just have to sleep it off and the next day will come. And then there's also the days where you're like, I'm going to go out and do every single chore that I haven't done for 2 weeks because I've been so tired. And that will also occur during these huge Schumann resonance blasts. So I've seen both sides of the spectrum, which is why this is such an interesting study, because there's so many things that can occur. But usually when events do occur, the symptoms are similar amongst the group, which is cool. And then some opposite as well, which is also cool. So some examples here are body aches within your spine and within your muscles, within your nerves, wherever your nerves are, because our nerves are the physical sort of structure in our body that channels electrical impulses. So when you're getting charged particles coming into your crown from your toroidal field, capturing it out from your environment, it can get, if your nerves aren't healthy and if they aren't being well lubricated and where they're blocked by heavy metals, there's going to be areas where things get caught and the energy gets stuck and accumulates and it causes issues and pain. So whenever, especially you know that there's a CME on its way, because again, they take 2 to 3 days, I would recommend that you make sure that you're very well hydrated, get some hydrating stuff to put in your water even. You can use some healthy salts, or I got some stuff that's made from coconut water. It's like this like dissolvable salt, and it's to help hydrate me because and again, the quality of the water in most of where we're living, except for people who are getting it out of like some fresh ground wells, like some of you lucky people out there right now, there is also these minerals and so on that can conduct this energy are lacking from our system. So we really do have to start giving ourselves that. I'll go into that in the next slide, but we also get headaches, migraines, dizziness, vertigo. You're feeling spaced out, you're feeling ungrounded, you're having an emotional release, like you're having emotional releases that you were not expecting that day. You're having and it's maybe not even your hormonal cycle, you know what I mean? Even though those two seem to line up. That's why we watch the moon. And then we have sleep disturbances. So when the Schumann blasts at 2 a.m. our time, but it's the middle of the day in Russia, or like the beginning of their day or whatever, some people wake up and they're like, oh, I'm awake. Oh, it's a Schumann. It blasted. Interesting. So now I'm awake, and you can wait a couple hours. Sometimes the blasts last 6 hours and then people are just up through the night. I'm thankfully not one of those people most of the time. I'm able to sleep through them, but I do feel for people who do not, and there are ways to help with that. Then we have dreams and hallucinations also become a thing during some of these cosmic events. Ear ringing is another one where all of a sudden you're hearing a zing from your left or your right ear, or maybe both. There's some esoteric understandings of what those things mean, but it's just in itself, it is a sign that you are sensing more now. You're sensing more than you can actually see. Then we have, again, heightened senses. And then digestive disturbance, our gut brain. Again, that's another geomagnetic field, or a magnetic field in our body that can be disturbed from the bottom of our torus in a way. And we have anxiety, feeling buzzy, heart palpitations, activation of a greater purpose is another thing, and falling away from the artificial matrix. So these are some examples of some things that I've gotten back from the community over the years. You've probably resonate with most of these things, if not all of them, and that's probably why you're here. So here's some solutions to those things, even though I already said some things. So we need mindfulness. Mindfulness exercise, again, could be the biofeedback thing. Being aware and mindful that there are environmental factors at play that aren't publicly known. So therefore you can check those things, you can share those things. If someone else is having an issue, you will be mindful to the energies, and you can be like, hey, did you check the Schumann resonances? Or the Schumann resonances were going off today, and they'll be like, what? And you'll be like, yep, those are the reasons. You can look at this PowerPoint that's 2 hours long. You'll learn. And then we have hydration, I mentioned, minerals and vitamins, very important. We need some silica, magnesium, calcium, like all of these things. There's so many things that we really do need to enrich. So if you are having issues, it means you may be low in these things, is what I'm saying. We also are, you could be low in cardio and stretching and weight training. So again, your muscles and your heart being the biggest muscle, strongest muscle, your heart and your muscles throughout your body, they're constantly channeling energy. That's how you get your muscles to move. And so if you aren't doing cardio, your heart muscle isn't getting a chance to clear some of the backup. If you're not stretching, your physical muscles aren't able to release some of this tension. And if you aren't using weights or doing some type of weight training, even against your own weight or resistance training, the areas in your joints and the muscles there can start to get weak. And it's just overall really nice way to help also bring rejuvenation and strength into those areas of channeling energy. There's also grounding, which is literally putting your bare feet on the ground, burying yourself in the dirt or in the sand if you have to. If it's not working, just your feet, and you've maybe been standing up for an hour and you're still having anxiety, get further away from civilization or start burying yourself in either more dirt or in natural flowing water, like a lake or the ocean or a river. I know a lake isn't that flowing, but you know what I mean. There is movement in a lake most of the time, some kind of movement. And then community participation is another big one. If you're feeling weird and you've done all the things and you're just like, I'm just going to have to sit this day out, it's nice to go on your phone and go to Ascension Diaries or whatever blog you prefer and talk and see how the community's feeling. Because it really does make you feel less panicked when you see 5 comments of people being like, oh, I'm feeling that same thing too. Oh, me too, me too, me too, me too. And it's helped me. It's helped so many people. And that's what I love what I do, because the community is a major factor of keeping peace and calmness through this through these illnesses or these issues that we feel because we're out of sync with something's not quite right. And then we have meditation and ceremony is another big one. Meditation is I've been meditating like crazy the last couple of days, and for me that's literally taking time, walking away from my house and my responsibilities and being totally alone and breathing as long and thinking and sitting in nature as long as I want to just basically work through the amount of things that are piling up. And then ceremony is another big one too, is actually creating and making your life more ritualistic and ceremonious. Like when the sun gives off a CMA, that could be a ceremony in your day. You could be excited. You could celebrate that. And then when maybe makes you feel a little weird, maybe it'll mitigate those issues because you were expecting it and you're welcoming it. And therefore you're in a way, you're aligning yourself more and with intention with that event. Then there's plant medicine is another option. Plant medicine has been a huge, huge help in my own process and my own healing. I don't have like the full expertise and I'm not a doctor of medicine in a way, like, but I would recommend plant medicine if you have not tried it as a way to help. And in specific, I would recommend CBD oil and full spectrum CBD oil as a recommendation. I'd also recommend working with other plant medicines if you feel guided to do so and it comes into your field. My motto is the medicine you need will come to you. And so even if you need to make an intention, like I wish to receive plant medicine to aid me in my health, then all of a sudden you may be getting ads for spirulina every day, or you'll be getting ads for CBD oil every day, or you'll be getting ads for ketamine treatment every day. Like that's not a plant medicine, but that's an example. Like those things will just start to happen. You just have to ask really for the help you need. You need to ask for help. And then also finally is sexual energy circulation. So either with yourself or with a partner, actually moving and having sex and moving the energy around is like literally one of our most amazing energetic processes of expanding your field and moving energy around and resetting your system and so on. So that is another recommendation that I would give as a way to help keep yourself healthy and flowing with the energies the best you can. So the overall question is, what is happening here? Like, what is really going on? Why are all these people all of a sudden following the Schumann resonance? Why is everyone getting these symptoms? What is the problem? What is the good thing? What's the bad thing? What's happening? Is it proof of ascension? Which is why I called it Ascension Diaries, because I learned about the theory ascension in a non-religious way, in a way, more of a spiritual way, like a not connected to a religion, even though in my next class, I'm doing an ascension class and I will go into the actual religious mechanics of that. And I've learned some things from then, even just by doing the class. It's super cool. But if there really is an ascension going on, people say that the energies are changing, they're coming in, our DNA is changing, we're mutating. These factors make a lot of sense. Just like puberty, just like a pregnancy, you will have a lot of these particular symptoms because your body is literally doing something. It's growing something new. It's changing something as well. Like through puberty, your whole body's changing. It's activating into a new way. When you're pregnant, you're growing a whole new body and your whole body is changing. So I like to compare ascension symptoms to pregnancy or puberty sometimes, if you haven't heard that one before. So here we go. DNA mutation and light transfer. We're right at the end here, just so you know. There is a scientist named Dr. Luc Montagnier, it's French, demonstrated that DNA can be spontaneously formed out of mere hydrogen and oxygen. Sealed, sterilized water tube next to a sealed tube with DNA being electrified with 7 hertz, 7.83 hertz, maybe 7 or 8 hertz, very particular specific hertz. And after 18 hours, there is an imprint of the DNA that has been transferred totally wirelessly just by staying in this container, in a water container within a container that's electrified at 7 hertz. And it's so amazing. Like literally DNA from one tube can go to a totally sealed empty tube and begin growing in that tube. And I read with like a 98% accuracy to the original DNA, which is also cool because it shows that, first of all, that the Schumann resonance potentially could be an actual vibration that's cultivating DNA and life to grow. And where it may not even actually be, but just like by shooting itself through other already DNA things, other things can grow that are copies of it. And this whole science is so fascinating. But in case you've never heard of this, definitely look up Dr. Luc Montagnier's science on this. Very cool. Very, very cool. And then we have DNA mutation here as well, where we're seeing UV radiation from the sun literally breaking apart strands of DNA and them forming new bonds within themselves. And in this case, in my opinion, these DNA mutations are harmful, are examples of harmful mutations sometimes to someone's DNA, which they do say that's why they ask you to be protecting yourself from UV radiation, because it can cause cancer. It can cause the DNA on your skin or wherever to break apart and build again in ways that is actually not healthy for it. But in my opinion, there's also ways where these frequencies and so on are cultivating healthy DNA mutations and so on. And that's a part of the science that I feel like is not being publicly talked about as much. It's always more about like, you're going to get cancer and die, instead of like, oh, light can transfer information and DNA can actually mutate and so on from cosmic radiation. So fascinating. I wonder how that's possible. Wonder what it's doing. And I think these symptoms are literally clues that you are having these moments and that this energy really is coming in. Some of it may not be good for you. Maybe it is a lot of UV X-ray radiation, because sometimes it is. And I showed you those charts. It's on there. And those are the days you stay maybe inside and you maybe can't move, so you aren't going outside anyways. But grounding in nature and grounding in the cavity that grew you naturally is also a way to help keep your DNA vibing and get the proper input for your DNA to continue thriving. So we're getting near the end now. So it's like, are you mutating? Do you feel like you might be mutating? Are you ascending? Is your is your consciousness expanding? Then please join the conversation, which most of you have. We have Instagram and Facebook page and a YouTube, which I use, but not as much conversation going on the YouTube channel. It's those other social medias are definitely more for that. So if you aren't following either of those things, please do. I would recommend, because there's, again, literally a community of 10,000 people on each of those platforms that are talking about this. So it's super, super nice. A lot of information available. And then if you want to support my cosmic weather research and support me doing this, there's some ways you can do that. Most of you have donated to be here. Thank you very, very much. I actually added up, and I wanted to be perfectly transparent with all of you, in 24 hours to do this class, even though, again, it was a very long class. It did take me many hours to make this. I raised for my family and for the continuing of our life and study $477 from the community, which is just like, for me, that's huge. And I know for some people who put on classes, they're like, oh, that's like the price of one ticket. And maybe one day that'll be my reality. I don't know. But I personally feel that giving through the heart and with pure intention, the community will give back and nurture me as well. If I'm nurturing the community, then community will naturally nurture me back. And on many cases, that's been very true. And I've been doing this study and not having any other type of employment. I've been doing tarot readings and this and teaching in a way, and now I'm expanding to becoming more of a public teacher and to supply and provide for my family, and it's been really awesome. So thank you all very much for holding this space for me to do this research. If you want to donate, you can. You probably already have. If you'd like a shirt, like I said, I've been designing clothes for this. I have a couple designs up. I'm going to make more. If you want to collaborate on a design, that's cool. But yeah, I have all this stuff that you can wear. And if now you probably know a lot more about the Schumann resonance, I made this specifically so you could teach about how to read the chart as well if you want, or you could just tout the hashtag really loud and make people just be like, what is that? And then they can Google it and they'll probably find me or someone of the like, or the Wikipedia page or whatever. They'll find something that'll give them something. But if you want to get a shirt, that's also a way you can support me. But if you want me to come to your event, if you want me to teach somewhere else, I'm located in the United States right now, and I'd be happy to go to any location there and see the many 50 states and speak with your community about this. I'd absolutely love to. If you feel that this is a value, I'd be honored. And you can contact me at ascensiondiaries@gmail.com. So finally, before we do that, I want to tell you all again, I am doing another class. If you like my teaching style and you want to actually just like keep gaining a knowledge base, or you know somebody who could really use this class is coming up hopefully by the end of this year, and it's going to be 10 modules. I want to make a shirt that says Ascension Class 2020 graduate, because I think 2020 graduate is just funny in a way, because we graduated 2020. It's a pretty big accomplishment after all the stress we've been through. So yeah, it's coming at the end of the year. If you want to be in that class, you just leave me your email, contact me, whatever, and I'd be happy to have you. I'm still trying to figure out the pricing for that and whatever. I'd be happy to take recommendations, because again, the way I think about money is kind of like nebulous. So sometimes someone with a more structured mind on that, it's helpful, and I do appreciate all community input. But that's literally the end. You made it, and I'm so happy we did it. I hope that wasn't too long. Hope that flowed good. Oh, you guys are so sweet. I'm just reading your comments really fast. So yeah, I don't see any questions. Okay, I'm going to open it up if you want now. So this is going to stay on the recording for people who want to see this later. If anybody has any questions that I could possibly answer, please unmute yourself. And if you wrote anything down or anything, this would be the time to tell me. And yeah, let me know. If anyone has anything to say, now is your time. Hopefully you can unmute yourselves. If not, I'll figure that out. Oops. I'm sorry, I didn't have my listening device in. Did anyone speak? I'm sorry, I missed it. All right, I guess it was just decent enough that it made sense to everybody to that extent. That's awesome. Thank you so very much, you guys, for being here on my very first Zoom call class. I hope it seems to be well received. I appreciate you all very, very, very much. There's some people who didn't get to come. Obviously, that's why I was able to raise so many in donations, but there's only like 11 people here. But I'm going to have this video available. I'm just going to figure out what the best way to do that is for everybody. And otherwise, I think that'll be it. So for the recording, I'm going to end it. Thank you all for being here.